I'm Jim Berger. I'm a partner in the law firm of Thompson Coburn in Washington, D.C., and also adjunct professor at Georgetown, which has nothing to do with this topic, but I thought I'd mention anyway because it's so much fun. You're really in for a treat. We've got a great group of panelists assembled to talk about establishing the Ultra HD 4K TV marketplace, strategies and technology and content innovation. No idea what that means, other than we're going to talk about ultra high definition TV and try and figure out what it is. You all in your programs have the bios of these people, so I'm not going to take all of their time, which I want them to talk, rather than to read their bios. I'll just tell you their titles. To my left is Rob Tobias, who's president of MHL Consortium. Then Nick Colsey, who's vice president of the television division of Sony Corporation, and Dr. Sean McCarthy, who's a fellow of the technical staff at ARIS. What I'd like each of you to do is take 5 to 8 minutes and tell us a little bit about your company, but more importantly, where you see, what is UHD TV and where do you see it going? Rob?
Thank you, and good morning to everybody here. For all you hardy souls and early risers who decide to come out and talk about 4K with us. So my name's Rob Tobias. I am president of MHL. MHL is a connectivity standard. It was formed by Samsung, Sony, Toshiba, Nokia, and Silicon Image, with the primary purpose of connecting mobile devices to larger displays. It was launched in 2010 as an organization. First products emerged in 2011, and since then about 650 million products have shipped with MHL. You probably have one in your pocket today if you have an Android device. All the leading Android smartphones have it. And last year we introduced the latest version, MHL3. MHL3 brings the specification up to 4K, and some of the first products have begun shipping this year, both on the TV side as well as the phone side. I have here a Sony Z2 smartphone, which has MHL3. This phone is capable of shooting 4K video, and through connecting it to your MHL3 enabled TV with a simple cable connection, you're able to watch the just beautiful video that these phones can take. Recently, the Samsung announced the Note 4, which also has MHL3. That's a 4K capable mobile device. So one of the areas we see being the first content for 4K, everybody, 4K, the CE industry, mobile industry is pushing very hard. The products are out there. Everybody keeps asking, where's the content? We see your mobile, your personal devices, your personal content as being one of the very important pieces of content. While your videos look very nice, this has a very excellent screen on it. If you want to see the full 4K resolution, you really want to get it up on the big screen. And it just looks amazing doing that. So we really think that not only will the Hollywood content and professional video content will be emerging. You've probably heard DirecTV make announcements. Netflix has a few shows. Those will keep evolving, but we don't want to forget about the personal content.
Great. Nick?
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so Sony, I think everybody understands where Sony fits into the 4K ecosystem. Clearly, there's a lot of areas where we are innovating in 4K, starting with the content. We make movies in 4K, TV shows, The Blacklist, Breaking Bad. Those were either shot in 4K or have been scanned from film to 4K. We make 4K TVs. We make 4K phones. Thank you, Rob. We make 4K camcorders. So really, and of course, all of our professional equipment, broadcast cameras, monitors, and editing systems. So, we participate in pretty much every step of the chain to bring 4K content from the lens through to the living room. My role in this has been to work with the team at Sony to bring movies and TV shows in 4K to customers' living rooms. So we have a service called Video Unlimited 4K, where you can enjoy over 200 pieces of 4K content, movies, TV shows, free clips. So we finally answered the question, where's all this 4K content to watch on those beautiful 4K TVs?
Sean?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Sean McCarthy, and I'm with a company called Aris, which is probably the biggest company you guys have never heard of. It's actually got quite a long history. One of our manufacturing facilities in Taiwan just celebrated its 50th anniversary. We have revenues over $5 billion at this point. And in the most recent history of Aris really kind of focuses on the Aris's acquisition of Motorola Home about 1.5 years ago. If you remember, Motorola was cell phones and set-top boxes and a whole bunch of other stuff. Split in two. One part got bought by Google. That was then spun off to Aris. So basically what we do is we build all the infrastructure that allows television programming to come down to the home. We also build a lot of the infrastructure for cable modems, for internet providers and that sort of stuff. My role at Aris is really kind of the applied vision scientist and video compression guy. So I work with the engineers in the encoding and transcoding groups. And more recently, I've had kind of the fun of going back into my playpen. My background was in applied in vision science, spent many years at UC Berkeley actually dissecting retinas and studying how the retina processes signals and using that information now to kind of understand what is ultra high definition TV. And that all started for us maybe about 2.5, 3 years ago when we started seeing folks like Sony coming out with the next generation of television. And it's opened up a whole new world for us. And the way I like to kind of think of ultra high definition is it's distinct from what happened when we went from standard definition to high definition. In that case, we had to kind of swap out all of our infrastructure. We had a new set of displays and a new way of looking at content in the home. But ultra high definition, I think for us, is actually a set of tools that are going to come out over time. And we hear about resolution, but just as important as resolution is frame rate and color gamut and high dynamic range and bit depth and those sorts of things. So I spent a lot of my time working with our customers who are like HBO and ESPN and AT&T and those folks, and understand, what is it they want to do? How do they want to deliver those great experiences to consumers going down the line? And what can we do to help that happen? So this is a very engaging time for us, very exciting time for us. We're great believers in ultra high definition TV, and just trying to get information and make it happen.
That's great, guys. It's really interesting talking about when I was at Apple. I got force-fed a lot of this stuff, so I will sound like I know what I'm doing, but you guys really do know. But they call it psychovisual.
That's right.
And the sort of thing that I always enjoy asking somebody is when you think of the entire chain of digital video production, starting with an actor, going into camera, compression, editing, recompression sometimes, transmission, broadcast or send over cable, hits your set, the set is there, you watch it. What's the weakest link in the chain that you can't improve? It's your eyes, right? You can only see to that. So it's fascinating to me that you study that. I've got a boatload of questions, but please let me ask a couple and then you guys start coming in with yours. So Rob, when are you going to get it on the iPhone? I had to ask that.
Yeah, of course. Open invitation. So love for Apple to consider. It's an open standard for anybody to adopt, and it's done extremely well on the Android, and you'll start seeing some stuff here on the Windows platform as well. So
for my Surface.
Well, I can't announce any products, but we're working with that ecosystem as well. So, everyone's familiar with HDMI. It works across any display device. It works across all computing platform devices as well as set-top boxes. MHL similar, and we just continue to expand our footprint. I've also forgot to mention we're also in the automotive platforms as well, where starting next year you'll see cars put MHL into their platforms.
That's great. Nick, what about transmission? I was talking about transmission. You've got a lot of this content already, which is exciting because so many people are saying, where's the content? how is transmission going to be affected if we have everything that's now HD becomes Ultra HD? Because obviously it's going to require more bits.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think 4K is really the first video format that came to, that came to over the top before it came to any other medium of distribution. So there's still no 4K Blu-ray available in the market yet. There are 4K broadcasts being planned by cable and satellite operators, but nothing actually live yet. So really the only way that you can get 4K today is ironically through the internet, which is really not the highest bandwidth connection into your home. But as broadband speeds increase, then you can get a 4K experience in any home with around 20 megabps connection, and that's increasingly common now. And one of the things that has facilitated this compression technologies, so using HEVC to deliver these streams instead of H.264, means that even though there's way more bits, potentially 4 times as many bits, the compression efficiency is 40 to 50% better. So you don't have to deliver 4 times the payload in order to see 4K.
Interesting. Now, speaking of seeing 4K, and this always gets me confused, and so Sean, you'll straighten me out at least, if not anyone else, which is you have to do what your mother said you shouldn't do. You need to sit closer to get the benefit of 4K. Yeah. Was it 3 screen? Tell us a little bit about all this.
Yeah. So I mentioned before that ultra high definition TV is different than the transition from SD to HD. And I think it's different in ways that don't have to do with specsmanship and things that are on pieces of paper. It has to do with the way we're going to consume content. And I think this experience has become more and more personalized. It's going to be a question of how close do you sit to the screen depends upon, are you watching sports or are you watching cinematic programming? And the reason I say that is that the human visual system has actually 3 levels of visual acuity. We often read in the press that there's the simple acuity, the retinal display, the point at which you can no longer see pixels. And that's one level. And that has to do with how fast data can get into your visual system. There's a lower level, actually, which is called Snellen acuity, and that's the ability to read and discriminate letters. And then there's one that's actually higher than that. There was a term coined by Gerald Westheimer in the 1970s. He was one of my mentors at UC Berkeley, and he called it hyperacuity. And hyperacuity has to do with your brain's ability to actually distinguish or recognize discontinuities and extended features, like discontinuities in a line. And when you look at the history of television, the evolution of television, standard definition was kind of Snellen acuity, the lowest level of acuity. High definition in your home was the first time you had a retinal display, even though we didn't have that term at that point. And you sat at the distance you sit now. When we go to ultra high definition TV, we're going to have a bifurcation. In one way, we're going to stay at that retinal display, but it's going to get just much, much bigger. We're going to have bigger real estate. Okay, so it's going to be bigger TV. We're going to sit closer to it. Okay. On the other side, if you have the same TV size you have today and you sit the same distance away, you cross over into that world, excuse me, of hyperacuity. And that hyperacuity is that first step to having that sense of actually looking through a window. So if you couple hyperacuity with higher dynamic range and enhanced color gamut and stuff, you start getting to the point when you look at a display in 10, 15 years from now, it'll be almost as if you were looking out that window. Okay? I think
are you talking about more bits, more brightness?
More bits, more brightness, wider color. So all those things that are right now limited in that chain of distribution to the television and the capabilities of those pixels on the television. And folks like Sony's and others are actually extending those capabilities now to actually match the performance numbers you envision.
Yeah, because I've seen a roadmap that goes to what 4,320p. 4,320p at 100 or 120 hertz. I guess we'll never get to the 24, 48, 72, 76, whatever it is. The sort of frame rate that matches film. I guess we're going to stick with the
go higher,
but not at something which reduces 3.2 pull down, though, right?
Yeah, no, I think the days of 24p that's being broken as well. I've been hanging out with the creatives last couple of days.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask Nick next is how, is the ecosystem going to get away from film?
Well, I think for as long as people enjoy movies and for as long as directors and cinematographers like the look of film, then no, you'll still have movies being shown at 24p because that's the way that they were shot. If you talk to a cinematographer or a director and ask them, with all of these other technology advances available to you, why do you continue to shoot in 24p? Often what they'll say to you is because they don't want their movie to look like video, and it's it's a simple.
Can't you do something about that, Nick?
It's a simple value proposition. Something that looks like video is television, and it has ads every 15 minutes and is free. And movies, generally the creative community intends them to look like a higher value from an artistic and visual standpoint. So this is a very subjective area, but that's why 24p won't go away.
It's fascinating talking about the human brain and visual. I used to be perfectly satisfied with 480i standard definition television, until some of the engineers at Apple of your kind of experience started pointing out the interlace artifacts, and all of a sudden I couldn't watch television anymore. So
once you know,
once you know
your experience.
So I gather where you are, Rob, is that we're going to have HD, Ultra HD on everything, every platform. Is that the goal ultimately?
Well, the electronics industry is definitely moving that way. As you've seen, prices for Ultra HD TVs have come down dramatically in just a year's time frame. So right now it's being led in China. China consumes the vast majority of Ultra HD TVs. They're also driving the price down, and I'm sure Sony's not too happy with the how quickly it is driven down. But those economies of scale really ramp up the pricing curve, or drive down the pricing curve. So, in the near future, when a consumer goes into a store, the price delta for a 4K device is not that greater than an HD device, and consumers want to spend a little bit more to future-proof. And so I think we're going to see a rapid transition into 4K TVs. We're also, as these phones continue to evolve at a rapid pace, the CPUs and GPUs continue to get faster and faster and higher levels of processing capability. So you mentioned the march to 4K. What you'll see very soon, and I want to make a prediction, is that CES 8K is going to make a big play. So the electronics industry is going to push us faster than the content industry and the delivery infrastructure. But I think for consumers, they will be able to take advantage of these moves forward. Technology. 8K. Geez,
I'm just getting used to 4K. Yeah, I want to get back to. I have some questions about that, about 8K. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce our late arriving panelist, Steve Silver, who's Director, Technical Business Development, Mobile and Connected Solutions Group at SanDisk. That's a mouthful, Steve. So we gave each of the panelists about 5 or 8 minutes to talk. I don't know. I'd like you to talk about a little bit about your company and their involvement in ultra high definition and your thoughts about where it's going. So
yep. So
that's your penalty. You got to do it right now.
Absolutely. So SanDisk, as many of you know, we're the little cards that you always lose in between your couch and your seat, car, and everything else between your cameras. What many people don't realize is that if you broke open your phone, we're probably the storage inside for the world's devices, most of the devices out there. and around Ultra HD, around 4K. SanDisk is doing a lot. Currently, SanDisk is a founder, along with Western Digital, Warner Brothers, and 20th Century Fox, in the Secure Content Storage Association. And the SCSA mission is we've developed a platform where it's the next generation of how will you get 4K movies into the home via bound media, whether that's a hard drive or it's other media pushing out. And Samsung has just announced it in Berlin at IFA in September. Their new smart TVs that are going to be able to play this content, secure content storage. And the future of 4K and Ultra HD in SanDisk size is only going to grow quantum leaps and bounds in terms of video. We're going to be seeing lots and lots of consumer devices here this next year that play and record 4K video, whether it's a handset or a tablet.
And distribution of Hollywood content on secure discs.
And
media.
And one factor of distribution of media around 4K until such time as BDA comes together with what is the next 4K Blu-ray.
Yeah, whether it's AACS 2.0 or what, I can't talk too much about that. But that's, if you look at the sort of, it's always been the content and devices, chicken and egg. Sony obviously has gone a long distance to provide some content, but getting Hollywood content out there, I think, is going to be a question of how soon we can get agreement on a content protection standard. As good as Blu-ray, AACS for Blu-ray, that got hacked fairly rapidly. So, and any content protection scheme will get hacked. And there's, in my view, the issue is, can you recover from it quickly?
Right.
So in any event, I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. If you're all awake yet, coffee. Yes, you, sir.
Hi, Joel Zanker from Jurassic. We developed a technology to get the content, the 4K content, to the device through the internet, which is also one of the challenges. I think what Steve mentioned here is very interesting regarding, on one hand, you have these devices and these TVs now, Samsung and others, that are displaying this 4K, and you have the great storage availability to store it. But how do you guys reckon, content is being produced in 4K and being delivered? But I think the big challenge is how it's going to deliver, how is it going to be delivered? And it seems quite clear that it has to be streamed, or eventually it has to, be delivered through the internet. So even if you have all this in place, what is I think one of the barriers to adoption is how is it going to get there? So you can distribute discs, of course, and do a retail distribution kind of thing. So my question is really how does how do you guys envision the actual ability to deliver and the impact this has on the net when 4K becomes a standard?
I think we sort of went through that a little bit. You weren't here, Steve, and some of the audience wasn't. But Nick, do you first want to sort of give your answer back again?
We're doing it today, and the internet hasn't broken, so I think we're going to be okay. But yeah, of course, it depends on the scale and how many people are streaming something in 4K at the same time. But I think we're still very, very far away from that scale being an issue. I wish it weren't. I wish every house in the US had a 4K TV, but
a Sony 4K TV.
They don't yet. So, ideal is a Sony 4K TV, but they don't yet. So I think fortunately, although broadband in the US isn't great compared with other countries around the world, it does get better every year. consumers do see a reason to upgrade their broadband connection as more and more members of the family are using bandwidth intensive applications and content. And when you invest in a 4K TV, I know a lot of retailers are also suggesting to customers, if you want to see Netflix or Amazon in 4K, because those apps are available or going to be available on our TVs very soon, then you might need to upgrade your broadband connection.
Others, go ahead,
Yeah,
Sean.
I'd like to add something to this. I think the issue of 4K and bandwidth in the internet is a little bit of a red herring. I think what ARIS does is actually provide a lot of the equipment to do the distribution, usually over managed pipes, but more and more over unmanaged pipes, over the top and that sort of stuff. And the theme that we're seeing is actually there's a decoupling of the content resolution from the display resolution. And that's the challenge that we're trying to address to let that scale. So when I say decoupling of content versus display, we need to take high definition content and make it look good on a 4K display. At the same time, I'm going to need to take 4K content and make it look good on a sub 4K cell phone. So there's a lot of processing that still needs to happen in the network, right? And that's the part that a lot of our customers and a lot of people, service providers in the industry, are grappling with right now. On one hand, they're saying, how do we migrate from a managed delivery system to a more of an over-the-top internet, but still semi-managed system on one hand? So that's just the distribution of bits, right? And the other one is, how do we make sure that the content that we're delivering creates a great experience no matter where you're looking at it? So.
I have a follow-up question I'll get to you, which is, I notice in this DVB EBU SMPTE roadmap, which I can't show because I don't have permission, but I can talk about it. It shows that the next bump doesn't seem to be more pixels. It appears to be faster frame rate, and also intriguing to me. And I don't know if any of you can talk to this. A 1080p 100/120 base layer. Does anyone on the panel understand what that means? I mean, I think I have an idea, but I'm not the expert.
So we talk to other standards organizations around the world. We're the last meter, sort of the connectivity, where DVB and others are the broadcasters, set standards, obviously for the EU. US has ATSC and Japan has NHK and so forth. So there's a number of areas Sean mentioned as well, frame rates being one of them. Anybody who watches sports, especially fast motion sports, soccer, football, basketball, you'll notice a lot of blur. And that's something they want to address through higher frame rates. So you get faster motion sort of scenes. So they see that as a value, not only in the UltraHD, but also at the 1080p as well, just because there's such a big infrastructure with 1080p. But even there, that's a doubling of bandwidth all around. So you need the production equipment, you need the distribution, you'll need the encoders, decoders, you'll need the links, the last links to be able to handle that as well. But also they talk about the deeper colors, the wider color gamuts. If you'll notice, and also something called HDR, high dynamic range. So if you'll notice, a lot of times if you have a color that's kind of a gradual shifting, you'll notice banding. And so that's something that can be made much smoother, so you have smoother color. With the HDR, you'll notice there's scenes where if you have high contrast and dark contrast, you'll lose a lot of the fine detail. And so these are ways to restore that detail. Somebody pointed out to me not too long ago, if you ever watch TV shows, they'll set the color balance so the sky looks white.
Yeah.
You don't notice it until somebody points it out to you. Then you say, wait a minute, the sky's white. Why is it always white? The sky's supposed to be blue. So these are the types of things that these added capabilities will enhance the picture quality, and as Sean mentioned there, start to look like you're looking out the window. And so I think those visual enhancements tend to be much more important than the resolution enhancements that we're seeing here. So, but all of these require higher processing power, more bandwidth. Each of those things add more to the technology complexity.
I may have more follow-up, but this gentleman's waiting patiently.
Yeah, and it's probably for Rob. I'll take answers from anybody. And I have to preface it by saying I'm old.
So you don't count, right? Is that?
But I remember 30 years in the computer graphics industry, albeit mostly in printer controllers, but I used for many years cell film recorders, which were, I think, about 8K for very specialized purposes, down to the Polaroid palette, which was virtually no K, to make slides locally, primarily in the education and medical fields doing presentations. And while 4K, I think, is a sweet spot because for years, after somebody had film and they brought it in, they entered it, they came out with 4K masters to go send out to the rest of the world because you needed 4K, at least 4K, to display on the screen of the theater for it to be reasonable. And while I encourage 8K and 16K and whatever else people want to come out with, I think from a practical standpoint, 4K for the basic home use and for using over the internet is somewhat impractical, and it's almost like size matters as a marketing tool as opposed to what do we really need. So my question is that until we get codecs that can compress that down so that when you get to the Netflix golden hours in the afternoon, when the internet is coming down anyway, how is a practical delivery of codecs, or maybe even automatically saying, okay, most computer screens 480 is fine, or 1080 will compromise there, is fine. How are you going to address that so that you can have delivery via the internet, which is what kids are using on their phones, and they don't need 4K to their phones. You just don't need that to see really great video. And that's where the world is going. Are you guys addressing automatically adjusting to the device you're going to so that you don't oversend data? Because you certainly don't even need 4K for 70-inch screen at home. Probably.
I'm going to redirect that to Sean. He's the infrastructure guy. We just do the last link between a phone and a device, or set-top box and the device, and we carry whatever those two devices want to negotiate for resolution. But Sean there deals with the infrastructure that delivers that.
Yeah.
And if you know, you might talk about -IF, which I think is an attempt to solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great issue, and I think it highlights something else. So let me answer the technical part of this first. So there's a whole bunch of adaptive bitrate protocols that are available now, and they can provide the right resolution, the right frame rate for the device, based on device capabilities, and then adjust dynamically on a time frame of seconds to changes in the bandwidth availability and also the server capacity. The thing so that's right, but I think the question is actually the question that kind of interests me the most, because it's the same question that everyone else is asking right now. It highlights something that's happening on the business side of the industry, where the cable operators, the IPTV operators, they've had service level agreements with the content providers, which say you must deliver this content at this resolution, at this frame rate, with these many artifacts to the consumer. As we move to an OTT and like a Netflix kind of environment, or an Amazon, or whoever you want to call it, HBO Go, without telling the consumers, we're in a situation now where we actually are regulating the resolution and the frame rate and the bit rate and everything else on a second by second basis, and there's no SLA, there's no service level agreement there. So I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen in the future. That's why I'm interested in the questions. Are we going to start developing a world where all that flexibility is good, right, and everyone likes it, or will the content owners start saying, well, oh wait, this content doesn't look right, it doesn't give that theatrical creative intent that I wanted to give to my consumers, that I consider is the value. I being a content owner, for example. So I think this is an issue. This is a question that's going to be percolating for a while, and it's got technical aspects. I think most of the technical aspects, like HLS and MPEG dash and those kind of protocols, exist. Now I think we're moving over to, how do, again, we come back to great consumer experiences. How does that translate into great consumer experiences that generates revenues and satisfaction? So.
Yes.
I'm a little biased because I'm with ETS.
Well, thank you for letting us know.
What role does audio and then you already touched on like the HDR and that kind of thing. But I think beyond pixels is really just about the experience. And as we're all saying, I don't think that pixel quality, number of pixels matters so much at a certain point. But what's the role of audio, object-oriented audio? For completing the experience. It's one of those things that have a very significant impact that you can't quantify. So
it's actually a fascinating question.
So I'll start with that. So object audio, I think, is very interesting, emerging technology here. That's one of the areas. So MHL we carry all sorts of different audio from stereo to the various DTS and Dolby formats there, and this object audio sounds very interesting. I know the studio masters are very interested in it because right now they have to master multiple audio tracks to be sent with the video, whether it's delivered on Blu-ray or over the air or some other mechanism. So they like the fact that, well, I can place the helicopter sound in the right rear, but they don't have to render that as a separate track. They can leave that up to the audio rendering device. And consumers have all sorts of different audio rendering, from the speakers built into my phone to a headset that I put on using a phone, or my home theater system, or maybe just a TV with its built-in speakers. So I think it'll give the opportunity for the industry to deliver a better audio experience across all the product lines using something like object audio. Where we're at is the standards are just emerging for that. A bunch of different standard bodies are debating over how it's going to be carried and whatnot. But I think you'll see in the over the next year or so, these object audio start emerge in being built into devices.
This is for Dr. McCarthy. A follow-up to that. There's sort of a theory that sound actually improves visual perception, and the theory comes from Darwin, actually. That if you think about primal Earth, right, and you hear a sound in the bush, you're going to look much more intensely at it with the center of your vision, because either it's food or it thinks you're food. I mean, is this real?
It's absolutely real. I think you can speak to it as well. But Mark Shubin was giving a keynote the other day, and Mark has worked in opera and television and all over the place. Really knows his stuff. And he was describing that one of the big impacts of audio is to actually make the image look bigger. Which is what you were just describing.
Right.
I don't know. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons that our 4K TVs come with much, much better speakers, because we think what our consumers are looking for ultimately is not resolution or one of these technologies, but something that's much more subjective, which is an immersive experience. And if just the picture is immersive and not the sound, then there's definitely something lacking there. So our 4K TVs come with, or at least the higher end ones, come with magnetic fluid-based speakers for the types of speakers that you'd find in high-end audio equipment. Integration with sound bars to give a spatial audio effect, even if you don't have room to put 5.1 speakers around your living room. So it's a key part of the experience, this immersive experience.
Phil,
Yeah, Phil Olivelle,
stand up and talk a little louder. We want to catch you on. We want to catch you for the folks online.
Oh,
Wave to them, give them a.
I'd like to ask you a question. I just found out I'm going to be asked this question. 4K is out, but we're already to send it, it's perfectly obvious from across a showroom when you've got high dynamic range. You have to get up close to see 4K television. I've seen commercials on television now for cell phones that are advertising high dynamic range. Are we just wasting time, and should all these panels be renamed the coming HDR revolution?
Well, that's a broad question. Who wants to start?
There is the 4K resolution's here, so that's done. So yes, that's the next area that is being developed and standardized. Right now, the standards have not firmed up yet, so they're being debated in a bunch of different standards organizations, and there's a bunch of different approaches being debated. So I think it'll take a little bit of time for that to work itself out. But I do see once that does work itself out, there's going to be some vast improvements in terms of the picture that is delivered to the screen. Now, this has to go all the way back to the authoring, through the delivery, through the actual rendering on the screen to bring that full experience. But so it's going to take a while for that whole thing to work itself out. But I do think that's the next big revolution in the 4K displays.
Follow up, Phil. Go ahead.
Right, because the issue is when 3D came out, the argument was passive versus active, and that was one of the reasons it was killed, because you never described the consumer proposition. Now we're talking about resolution while the press is already talking about the next generation television set. Should we just be laying quiet and focus on the next gen because 4K is coming, and kind of refocus the debate so that you've only got one thing talked about instead of two things the consumer has to think about?
I'd like to, when I started off this morning, the way I like to describe ultra high definition TV is it's a set of parameters, one of which being resolution, but frame rate, color gamut, high dynamic range, bit depth, all those things are very, very important. And I think what we see is what we always see with technology. We see the hype cycle, right? So you start off with 0 and you hit the peak of hype, and then you kind of declines, and sometimes you get a backlash, goes underneath. And so high dynamic range, rightly, has got a lot of hype right now, because I'm a great believer. It's a great thing. It is not fully mature yet, and we do need to do a lot of more work. So I don't think we say, let's not talk about 4K, because we're at the point where 4K is becoming commercially mature. It's showing up at people's houses, and we can start delivering better experiences to those devices by doing things all the way through the infrastructure. The only part of the end-to-end ecosystem that still is a little bit of a challenge is, I think, in the studios, and Nick can talk more about that, is that the workflow involved in the raw film coming from, and you can talk about it in the storage, that's still a challenge because it's just so much data, okay? But having said that, I think we should be talking seriously not only about high dynamic range, but also high frame rate, because high dynamic range will give you the opportunity to have that sense of storytelling, engagement with the content. But the high frame rate is another thing that I think at some point we'll get a little bit of hype. Maybe not as big of hype as high dynamic range, but the high frame rate will allow sports programming and live programming to kind of go to another level, where with cinematic and episodic content, you don't need that high frame rate. In fact, often it works against you because you've lost that engagement. But with other kinds of content, again, a divergence of content type and display type, that high frame rate could be really, really important. So I think we should talk about all of that stuff, but recognize that 4K is something we can actually do right now, and high dynamic range is something we need to work on. So. Because
wasn't that one of the problems with 3D, is that to a lot of people it appeared muddy and dark? And
yeah, that actually was it was low dynamic range, because especially in the cinema, if you have a polarizing filter, you've lost half your light, and on your lenses you're losing half your light, and so it gets very, very dark. Yeah.
Those of you who are watching online, please feel free to tweet your questions. Let's see, if we're going to go there and then there. Yes.
I'm going to ask an A and a B, and the B is in case you can't answer the A.
Boy, this is a tough audience, I'll tell you.
Well, because you're not content creators, as far as I know. What has the talk been?
Everybody's a content creator.
Way to go, Nick.
What has the talk been around the cultural impact? And the example that I'll use in the mid and late 60s, when television shows all started being shot in color, every wardrobe person, set designer started to put in, you know, every show was proud as a peacock. It was bright colors, and that trickled down or out into the world, into the fashion world, home decor. So do you think that, and that was like a huge shift all at once. The big question is, you don't want to talk about that. Where are we with speaker technology, particularly for phones? Because this is the Note 3, and the sound sucks.
But buy a what's that called? Was it Firefly, and good and Beats ear sets. You get incredible sound out of it.
Yeah, but when you want to share it with your friend,
Well, just have a little Y connector now.
yeah.
So go ahead.
I'll try the A. Maybe not a direct answer, but you know, some of us were at the SMPTE conference earlier this week, and we heard film directors talking about how they are changing what they do for what the conference called more, as in more resolution, more dynamic range, more color gamut, all of these things. How does that affect the shoot? And one of the directors who spoke talked about you know, all of these different technology elements. You know, they all have their own challenges, but the person on the set who had to change the way they did things the most was the makeup artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, even with ID, it took a while. Some of these shows, people look horrible until they.
It wasn't, if I recall film history, when there was a big leap in lenses in the 30s or 40s, I can't remember what it was. There was what's called the Vaseline clause. A lot of the actresses took a look at themselves as this new higher resolution in film and went, oh, you have to put a gauze over the lens if you're going to shoot me.
Yeah, well, it's no simple task, because if you put too much makeup on, it looks like, you know, the person has too much makeup on. So, you know, what the director explained was that at least for the men, they actually had less makeup to make them look more natural, because the makeup that was being used on them just made them look unreal, you know. So that's clearly a big shift for creative people who are used to doing things in a certain way.
You were next.
So it just comes back to, I guess, how do you communicate all the other things considered besides resolution to the general public?
That's
So
a good
much easier to say,
question.
oh, here's a number, a digit. And it makes me think back, I'm also a photographer, it makes me think back to photography, when there's always like the race to higher resolution, even though, you know, frequently increase resolution without increasing light sensitivity and noise level and that kind of thing. Yeah, with worse pictures. So you have consumers that were getting like the, you know, 30 megabit camera and wondering why their pictures were coming out poor compared to, you know, a good old 8 megabytes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Nick, you're closer to the consumers. How is Sony going to get all this bundle of great stuff communicated, or are you just going to say 4K and leave it at that?
So one of the things that we've been doing as an industry, working with the CEA, is to make a well-defined definition of what 4K Ultra HD is and is not. So, you know, that's part of it. There's a logo which has just been agreed by the industry, 4K Ultra HD, and you can only use that logo and you can only talk about your TV sets as being 4K Ultra HD if you meet a certain set of criteria. So that's kind of the minimum viable product level of requirements. And then on top of that, you know, the CE market is all about innovation. So one manufacturer may want to go in one direction in terms of layering on additional capability in the display or in the TV set. And other manufacturers are free to add other technologies. And, you know, that's, you know, the market will decide.
Yes, sir.
I know we're talking about 4K, but when you're away from that big screen, is there any plans to push the envelope on the user experience? For instance, haptics. Is there any new standard coming up that has a soundtrack dedicated to haptics for mobile devices? That's where potential realness comes in?
SanDisk is obviously pretty close to the mobile industry, and not that I've seen that's coming, right? In terms of that using that increased storage that's coming in bandwidth. I haven't seen anything. I know there was a talk at Mobile World Congress this year, but I haven't seen anything in terms of additional a handset saying, this is increased levels of ability.
Yeah, there's been individual attempts from different companies to do things, but I haven't really seen anyone try to make a standard out of it. Where it may emerge as if Apple on their platform decides to do something and Google on their side does something. Those are the two big players that can move the market. In the interim, you'll have companies that will try bits and pieces. Some of the Samsung have tried some different things with gestures and other stuff, and you've seen some screens with a haptic feedback, and so there's attempts to try things, but I don't think anything has really caught on yet.
Let me throw another question, which is potentially a little speed bump here. The guy who taught me about digital video, Gary Demos, who actually won an Oscar for technical achievement, did one of the first digital special effects in a film called True Lies. There's a scene at the end where the daughter's hanging on to the plane, on the Harrier jump jets, and Arnold is bringing the plane down, and there's no cutaway. Which, I thought there'd be a cutaway, so, the stunt people would get off. But no, they actually were on there, belted, of course, quite well, and they were lowered by a crane. And the way he did the special effects was each frame could only be loaded on a SideQuest. I don't think they're around a cartridge, one of these big cartridges. And frame by frame, he would edit out the wires. Today, things have gotten a lot better, and a lot of digital special effects are done, but it requires tremendous compute power. And the studios I've talked to are saying it's 2K, and it's going to be a long time before we can think about buying the computing powers. How do we deal with that? Is up resolution going to be good enough, or are we going to see, like, all of a sudden the picture doesn't look as good? I shouldn't ask these kind of questions. Everyone's throwing them.
No, this isn't my area of expertise, but it is something that that came up again at the Simply conference. That the special effects of 2K, not because they can't be 4K, but because of economics.
Right.
It's just it costs so much more to do a 4K creative. But when you create those assets, I think we're going to start seeing those assets get created as 4K becomes more and more acceptable. And I think the thing that's going to push the VFX, the visual effects, probably won't be Hollywood. And this is me just speculating right now. I think it's going to be all the episodic 4K ultra high definition TVs we're going to see getting pushed to the home. Because that's where there's going to be some specsmanship, and there's going to be some quality shootouts between the different vendors. And that's where it's going to actually pay off.
Art, thank you for your
and I don't think this is as big an issue as it might sound. I mean, you can watch Looper or Total Recall, the rebooted Total Recall in 4K today, and see if you can tell where the special effects end and the live action begins. It really isn't noticeable.
I've got a tweeted question from my friend Richard Doherty, and it may need a little explaining, but what does the panel think about ATSC 3.0 for boosting UHD programming for broadcast and cable? For those of you who don't know, ATSC is the standards body for over-the-air television in the United States. I know what 2.0 is, but which is going to OFDM and dropping the 1912 patented compression technology called interlace. Those are the two things I know they're doing with 2.0. I don't even know what they're doing with 3.0. Does anyone on the panel know, so we can answer Richard's question?
Well, I mean, 3.0, amongst other things, brings you 4K. So you can't do 4K on off-air delivery without the standard ATSC 3.0. So
Will they
that's one of them.
will they be able to get that in 6 megahertz? That's the bandwidth for over-the-air television.
You're right. I mean, these standards are built around. I'm not an expert, but these standards are built around the available spectrum that is there. So yeah,
So with HEVC, you think they'll be able to get?
GVC and other technologies. Yeah.
Great. Other questions from the audience? Oh, it went to sleep on me. So is the 8 bits, 10 bits, 12 bits, 14 bits issue? I don't really understand that. Why is that important or not?
Okay.
we go to Dr. McCarthy again. All
More
right.
stores and more bandwidth. So.
Right.
It's actually important for a number of reasons, and they all go to all the different parameters. We're talking with ultra high definition TV. Right now, we're in a world of what's called Rec 709, which is a color gamut, and everything is delivered by 8 bits. And that color gamut is good, but it can get bigger. So you need to go to higher bit depth, actually expand the amount of colors you can display on a TV. Okay, and that's called the wide color gamut. So that's one area, and that has to do with the ability to discriminate colors. It's McAdams ellipses, if you want to look it up online. Another one is we're moving into a world of higher dynamic range, and in fact, is we already have brighter displays. So the original specifications for television basically implicitly assume something called 100 candelas per meter squared. And candelas per meter squared is luminance. And luminance is the basically the brightness, if you will. That's not a quantitative term of the display. But modern LCD, LED backlit displays are up around 200, 300 candelas per meter squared. And so we're stretching content already and doing a great job of it because these displays look great, but using only 8 bits. And we're starting to see more and more banding, okay? So as we go to the next level of brightness and contrast, we need more bits in order to code that. And it's not just bits that are important, particularly for high dynamic range stuff. I think everyone's familiar with a gamma function, and a gamma function basically describes how the linear light is mapped onto a bit code. When we move to a wider range of bright luminances, we'll need a new gamma curve. And there's several proposals out there right now, and this is an area we were actually talking before the conference where there's a lot of concern. And back to your question is, should we just be talking about high dynamic range? I think the thing we should be talking about high dynamic range is one, it's great, we want to have it, but two, let's make sure we get the standards right, because right now we have a lot of competing propositions, and some of them have really great aspects and some of them have other great aspects, and sometimes they don't marry together. So we want to make sure that we build an ecosystem that, again, my theme is always, how do you deliver great experiences to consumers? Because I'm a kind of vision science guy. We want an ecosystem that goes from the glass in the studio to the glass in your home, where we can guarantee and we can ensure that everyone along that chain can do the best possible job they can do. And that's where we need standards. So,
isn't there a potential problem? You talk about that whole chain of multiple compressions?
Compression, concatenation, yeah.
Because that, as I understand it, every time, even though the technology, the HEVC is a great technology, but every time you compress, you lose something from the picture.
You do, and it's not just compression. It's anytime you do a data reduction. So if you're at 16-bit RGB linear color coming out of the camera, the very first thing you have to do is then map it to some sort of gamma space. It's not always gamma, it's log C or something. And then bring it down all through your post and all your workflow. Right. You have to make sure you have to safeguard that material. So one of the ways to do that is actually with metadata. So that's another area of standards, is that from the camera, create a system where the metadata from the camera, and every time anyone touches the content, the metadata gets associated with that content. Bring it all the way down as far as you can through the chain and make it economically advantageous to the people who have to touch the data going down the pipe to keep that metadata, right? That's another area that we actually have to work on, because we are getting to the point where we're going to be mashing the visual performance limits in color and brightness and time and space and everything else. And we're going to start noticing when someone does along the pipe. So.
Other questions from the audience? Can't believe you've answered all their questions. Yes.
I came in, apologize. Did anyone ask about or speak about compression, HEVC standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we haven't discussed
No, we
it.
haven't actually.
Done,
We keep mentioning it all the
Yeah.
time. So I mean, I'm not an expert in compression, but I know enough to be dangerous. So talk about HEVC. What?
Yeah. I'll talk about HEVC, I think, so the technical side, but I'm kind of curious to see how it translates into the mobile storage side as well. So HEVC is high efficiency video coding. It's the next generation of video compression. It follows AVC, which is advanced video coding, which you probably also know as H.264 or MPEG-4 Part 10. And that was the successor to MPEG-2. Okay, so we're kind of on the third wave of digital compression in a sort of a serious entertainment television world. And HEVC is basically AVC, its previous H.264, but more sophisticated. It's got more options for encoding things, and it's got a few more tools. Okay, the one big change it has from previous digital compression standards is that it doesn't support, it supports but does not have specific tools for interlaced content. Okay, so HEVC's big advantage is it's twice as efficient as H.264 AVC. Okay, and H.264 was twice as efficient as MPEG-2. So on business models, that gave us advantages. One is we could actually deliver HD, SD content at good or better quality at half the bit rate. Okay, but over time, then that allows you to have new business models. So what happened with MPEG-2 is we started getting into DVDs and that sort of stuff. And then when we went to H.264, it allowed us to actually launch IPTV services and start talking about ultra high definition TV. HEVC, that's coming out right now, and it's no coincidence it's coming out basically at the same time, and we're going to the next step of quality in ultra high definition TV. It's going to allow us to do a couple of things, and in short order. I mean, our equipment's coming out right now. Is deliver what we delivered in the past better, more efficiently, free up bandwidth for other services, and at the same time go to that next level of video quality. Okay, HEVC is mature at this point. It matured very quickly because it's kind of it's a more sophisticated version of what we already had.
Yeah, and I realize it's a little bit of a moving target, but what do you see as a bit rate for good quality 4K dynamic range, all the sort of bells and whistles?
Yeah.
What's the sort of megabits a second? I realize that's kind of not a fair question, but it's just like going like this. I know, but
so I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna waffle and then I'm gonna boot. Waffle is it depends upon what you're trying to do. It's the experience that you're trying to provide to the consumer. And the thing I'm going to boot on is how does that translate into mobile?
Good. Give it to Steve. He deserves it.
Well, mobile storage is just growing, right? You now see Apple dropping 16 gig, 32 is the norm, and 128 gig is there today, right?
I want one of those micro.
Yep. So you can go down to Fry's and pick up your.
And the price keeps dropping.
Your 128 gig for your phone today, the micro USD, and so off of the storage is just we sky's the limit. We just announced a 512 gigabyte SD card.
Are the mobile manufacturers, are they sizing the memory based upon what's just the economics of how many cents per gigabyte, or is it how much do they think they're actually going to need?
It's all monetary.
Okay.
It's all dollars. How much is that bomb going to cost me? Right? At the end of the day, and if they know that they can get a 32 gig at the same cost as they were paying for 16 2 years ago, or even a year ago, so they expect to have that. And of course, we want that. We want them to move to that 128.
Yeah. So Nick and Rob, how is the ecosystem going to adapt to this? 'Cause I believe that all of the TV sets out there today, except for the people who are now buying, are MPEG-2.
So all the 4K TV sets that we sell and that most of our, at least the tier 1 competitors are selling, have HEVC 4K decode built into them. That's what.
Well, I'm talking about the legacy sets that are out there, which are
legacy sets that are out there. Yeah, if they don't have HEVC, then we have a 4K media player box that has the HEVC decoder in it. So you can buy one of those, hook it up through HDMI 2.0, and enjoy Netflix 4K on pretty much any 4K TV, not just Sony TVs, but all of them.
And what you've seen is even the HD era, even though people have MPEG-2 decoders in there and then HEVC for the emerging for 4K, is you still buy a bunch of devices to hook to your set. You buy, you know, some of them you rent from your cable or satellite company. Others you go out and buy a Netflix, a Roku box, or a Chromecast stick. So I don't think codecs really matter because there are always ways to get that content into your TV through external devices. So in the TVs, they will put it in there, and people just they adapt at how they want to get the content, what device gives them access to the content they want. And also sometimes it comes down to the UI. They may prefer a certain device's UI for receiving their content and finding their content.
I know we don't have anyone from cable on board, but how are they going to deal with this, new codec world? Are they going to did anyone see them going to it?
Sean can answer. Sean sells them that.
Yes,
Oh, good.
Yeah. So the things we announced actually just recently, I think it was at SCTE, was for the programmers, so the ESPNs and those folks in the world, not necessarily who the customers are, but the folks who are originating the content and sending them down to the MSOs, IPTVs, and those folks, they usually go over the satellite. And so that's the first place we're going to see HEVC being adopted. So they'll use HEVC to basically double their capacity over the transponders. And that's important because satellites are, there's limited bandwidth there. And if you lose a satellite, it's a huge deal. So you really want to use that resource very, very efficiently. And then on the other side, on the catching side, we have integrated receiver decoders, IRDs. And those are provided to all the MSOs, the cables and the IPTVs and those folks. And then they do the translation. And we've announced a new product to do an HEVC to MPEG-2 and MPEG-4 translation. They're also using it at the same time to look at using those IRDs to start distributing HD and SD, MPEG-2, AVC, HEVC, all out of the same place.
David, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I had a couple questions, if that's okay. But next, first, on your comment concerning legacy devices, and you could attach, the 4K device to that. But what you'll get on the screen, will that be 4K or it'll just be HD quality if it's a legacy TV?
Well, I think the question was about legacy 4K TVs. So
no, we can change to legacy 1080p.
Right. If you don't have a 4K, if you don't have a 4K TV, you're never going to see 4K.
So the other question is, a lot of the talk is on the video side of the experience. What about on the audio? Because these are going to be for home theaters and all. And, Dolby Atmos is out, which is now creating a better experience. But are there any other bells and whistles in the standard that are going to help to enhance the audio side?
Yeah, I don't know about standards, but I think better speakers, better amplifiers, better audio reproduction. When you're upgrading your home theater system to include 4K, it's probably a good idea to think about the sound as well to get that fully immersive experience. And this is why we build in magnetic fluid speakers into a lot of our 4K TVs, is to give a much higher, much better sound quality than you had with the TV that you're upgrading from.
Comment is more of a comment from the tweeters out there. From Monica Lang, the Ultra HD 4K brands need to focus their branding on UHD 4K as an immersive experience, not as a technological improvement. That was a pretty good comment. That it's an experience. That's more going along where you were talking about, Sean. Is that it's really not more pixels, more this, more that. It's now immersive TV. I like that. She hasn't trademarked it yet, so maybe you guys can grab it. We have just a couple more minutes. We have to evacuate at 9, so I'll ask the speakers to go outside if they want to continue talking. Yes.
A couple of years back, I didn't see there was suddenly a video wall experiment came out, but then they kind of died away.
Microsoft, right, did that.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Standard screens and multiply by 30 and whatever. Where is that going? Question number one. Question number two. as more eyeballs are on the smaller devices, unfortunately, but do you think at some point this video would start to shoot two angles, one optimized for the smaller screen, one for the big screen? They currently do 2D and 3D together. They can do that, right? But do they do synchronized different angle for smaller screen?
That reminds me of the protection of the old 4x3 and the shooting, so that the side panels were nice to have, but didn't matter.
Yeah.
Who wants to take on the big screen? Is anybody? Yeah, I guess that's
in terms of a video wall, I think a technology that we showed at CES and which is on sale now is our ultra short throw projector, which is a device that you can put just within about a few inches of your wall, and it projects from this device up to the wall. It's like a low sort of credenza size device, and it projects onto the wall 150-inch 4K image just onto any white painted wall. So that's using laser projector technology, so it starts up instantly and it's very bright. So that's really a more practical way of having a video wall than putting lots of tiles, video tiles across your wall, which most living rooms can't really accommodate.
We have time for one more quick question. If not, we'll end a minute or two early. And I want to thank the panel. My goal is achieved. I don't care about you guys. I enjoyed myself and I learned a lot. So I want to thank the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.